Okay, so let's start. Okay, so hello and welcome to Lockdown Still Lives Show and Tell. And today we have a theme as chosen by Caroline. It was, wasn't it? Yes, you chose.
Yes,
It was the theme of senses, which is a beautiful theme. And I think as every time when you suggest something, all of you, it makes me think about our senses. So yeah, I've spent a week trying to figure out which one is actually my favorite sense, because Caroline, you mentioned that, you know, one of the senses, I won't give too much away, you know, you would find hardest. And I've been going through all of them, and yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? It's so hard. I love my taste. You know, when kind of coronavirus, when they told us that you'd lose your taste, I mean, that, I think that would be terrible for me. Music, hearing, I can't imagine being without that. Yeah, seeing, as you said, yeah, unbelievable. I think from a sense, if you once had sight, it's probably easier than if you've never had sight. It must be unbelievable. So yes, so I really look forward to kind of hearing from you and what you're all thinking. I actually have prepared like a little Nina Simone feeling good song, just that encompasses so many senses to me. But you know, I think I still haven't figured out how to put sound on the group, so I'm going to leave that. And Caroline, because you came up with the theme, if you, do you mind starting maybe today?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll put you on spotlight so we can see you. Okay.
Hello everyone. Right. Gosh, full screen's a bit nerve-wracking, isn't it? Right, okay. Hi, yes, it did evolve, didn't it, out of our conversations. And it occurred to me that the senses have been something that my whole life, as a worker, but also just generally as a person, I think, have been probably extremely important to me. I'm a very sensory type of person, and I learn that way, and I often think that way, and I respond that way. Not all people do, so I find that quite interesting in itself. Anyway, as you know, I went to art school initially, but all the time before that, I only really went to art school because it was the better of two, not lesser of two evils, but I only really had a choice because we moved in the sixth form completely away from everything I knew and all the things I wanted to do in a very, very difficult year for us. We'd had a bereavement of my sibling, and we all moved away within 3 months, completely away from London. And I went to this red brick school, which didn't have any theatre or drama at all. It was a very academic type of school in that way. And so I was always loved art, and so I continued to do art, and I did my art A-levels. And from there, not having had the confidence, and I'd lost a lot of confidence I hear because of the terrible things that happened in our family, really, I suppose. And I'd moved and everything at 60 and a half, which is not easy, is it? And so I fell back on art, as it were. I say fell back. I always loved art, but it was not what I was going to do. And so then I went to foundation course to get away from Stafford. We lived in Stafford, which for me was like the back of beyond. It's actually a very pleasant Midlands town, but it wasn't for me because I was a London girl and I felt, you know, I'd gone into complete like wastes of Siberia really at the time. Anyway, that's really the context with which I ended up at art school. And as I said to you before, I did really love much of my art school experience, and it has, you know, given me a sense of who I am most of my life, forever really. And I know I think and see things visually as a theatre person in a different way had I not been to art school. So what I wanted to talk about today was the sense of what for me has always been what I knew I had to do, and what made me want to act and perform and then ultimately direct through teaching and as a director in other ways. And it was a sense that I didn't know had a name until I looked it up. Well, it came in at me when I was doing, you know, researching like we do on this thing. It's always fascinating to spend a good few hours, isn't it, looking up what you're going to do and thinking about it. And the word that came up to me, and I put it out there, and I've never heard it said, of course I'd never use it again, but it's just the most wonderful word because I love hearing new words. It's called proprioception. Proprioception. That's PROPREOCEPTION. Now this I suspect is in psychoanalytical, physical, medical terms, is the sense of the awareness of our bodies in space at all times. Now, can you see that that really hit me as somebody who works in the theatre, as a practitioner and a teacher of theatre practice? So I'm going to read out what I wrote, because otherwise I go off on one, as you know. So here I go. I wrote this. I associated this word as a sense with which I've understood, practiced, and worked with others to enhance my total working practice. But I've never heard it called this. My first experience of this was as a very, very young performer in the play Anne Frank's Diary, which I directed in my school inter-house dramatic competition. I was playing Mrs. Van Dam at the time as well. I daringly, I thought at the time, had the Nazi SS officers banging on the school hall doors, which was offstage, in the audience, as they had been informed that the hiding place contained the two families. It was that crisis point when they find them in the loft. At that exact moment, I, as an actor, was holding a spoon and laying the table for the scene's breakfast moment. I decided to react to this shock of the banging on the doors by dropping the metal spoon on the stage as the shouts and crashes on the door began. And this, seriously, was an extremely powerful feeling and a very powerful moment in my memory as a performer, and who I knew what I wanted to work with. I had the audience in my power at that time. When I dropped that spoon, the whole audience I should never forget it. And I was, 14, 15 or something. I knew it was the key to being a good or a bad performer, or not a good or bad, but effective performer at that time, It was to have control of the audience. Now, that word control is not normally a word I use. I'm not a very controlling person, I don't think, but possibly that's why I like it when I am in control on stage, or when I can control others on stage. It's possibly why I like that, because I'm not a very control person otherwise. I found that very interesting. And it reminded me of that moment. But I was in, I've written here, a proprioception state, I think. I was aware of my body in space at all times at that moment. And that was something very powerful. Every performance, I faked this instant shock. It worked every single time. So to elaborate, I loved all the arts since I was a girl, and performing in most of anything as I gained experience. But more than anything, as I gained experience, I loved working as a director. But of course, a director is many things. It's a shamanic sort of person in a group of people conveying something. It's a priest, of course, which we talked about in my catechism, which I saw a lot of. It's also a leader, and of course, yes, the teacher that I eventually became is also the director in a way, isn't it, of the proceedings. So it's interesting that that all came together. Theatre and drama as a discrete art grew out of religious ritual. I'm going to give you an absolutely very, very quick history of how theatre is going full circle again now. Theatre and drama as a discrete art grew out of religious ritual. Think of social gatherings, festivals of spiritual celebrations, seasons, and offerings to the gods, which we feared otherwise. At one point in time, what happened was, even though we were all sort of looking inwards in these festivals, all part of them, like in a sort of rock festival now, somebody stood outside the festival. This is very basic sort of description, but they stood apart from it, witnessed it, and they became either the director, the priest, the shaman, the person who then observed and witnessed it and controlled it and said, I'm judging you now, I'm looking at you, instead of being part of it. So that's how it all started. I mean, that's a very, very incredibly quick version of all that. If you think of, in the West, our Greek theatres, which were performed outside in the elements, in full sensory, capacities, highly ritualized and hierarchical, and all male, of course. These festivals and plays included dance and music and text, using all the senses, and it was very important. All three were equally important. every time through all that beginning of Greek drama. Over the centuries, theatre space became enclosed. I mean, I'm cutting quickly here, obviously, over centuries. And audiences were more separated off from the actors. And the stories changed from gods to kings and queens, then to aristocrats, and then to your ordinary Joe Bloggs. That's only happened in the last few hundred years, amazingly. That's stories that were considered worthy enough to be shared and experienced. As always changed, so did the playhouses. Roofs were added. So therefore, lighting was then introduced because there was no light, because most of these plays for centuries had been in the daylight. They'd gone on for hours and hours. Lighting was introduced quite often once they had the roofs on to stop lewd and wild crowd behaviour, because of course the audiences that came to theatres and festivals were allowed, were given, if you like, a transgressive chance to do whatever they wished. There was stuff going on in Elizabethan playhouses and before that in Greek theatres that were unbelievable. I mean, I went to, some of you may have seen some of the amazing Greek theatres out there in Europe, where they showed you, where the brothels were and etc. It was all happening at once. It was all part of an amazing sort of pit of amazing life, really. But after the Restoration, there was a formalising. Once they closed the theatres down after the plague, and they said it was getting too crazy, and people were, there was too much lasciviousness going on, etc. It was just far too sort of over the top. And after the Restoration, there was a formalising, and it became more passive, and audiences developed a more passive reception, and they sat, restrained as in a sort of contained, darkened space, often called still the black box. And that really, we still have this today, and many people still have this today as a template for classic traditional theatre in our heads. To watch a piece of drama, you must go and sit passively, look forward. This is how most people's idea of, I'm going to the theatre is, or if you are someone on the street. Passively looking ahead and receiving something that's done to you, and you receive it. And we still have this. We still have this today. I mean, don't you all think that? That's what most people would say, I'm going to the theatre. Think of a pantomime, say. That's what the vast majority of your normal, everyday persons, at least one person they will see one thing, if not a pantomime. Well, theatre has become full circle in the last decade. It's loosened its stays and thrown off its strict rules and etiquette. Thank God for that. But in Shakespeare's Globe, where once you could pay more to actually sit on the stage with the performers and show, that you were the bee's knees, this is now developed into a more totally immersive theatre for experiences of actors and audience, which is really how many people don't understand that theatre has changed, and it has to change with the times, and it's taking it slowly, but it is doing it on the sort of edges. The director more often now is not a teller or move here, there, and don't say it like this type of person anymore. They are a facilitator of a democratic group exploring another world, which must be literally conjured into existence for witnessing and for evaluating and for entertainment, but also for the judgment even of others, that is the audience. The demarcation lines are few in some cutting-edge work between performance art. Say for example, between performance art is the case where the protagonist merely states that I am the artwork, shows action or text as an original one-off act in time. Performance art isn't the same as theatre or drama. It is real, said Marina, I can never say her name, Abramovich, how do you say that? I'm sorry, I haven't written it down right. Marina Abramovich, who is the world's probably most well-known leading performance artist. It's real, she said, but theatre is faking. It is harnessing imagination. Every performance, the what if and the only believe, each time you do it, it is a one-off, but it is similar, but never the same. Every time you repeat your fakery. To be a director is, in a theatre performance, is to use every sense of yourself all the time. An overall world of the story must be realised in the group and then shared to the audience. So the group you work with has to realise the sense of the world of the play, and then they have to be able to then take that and share that with an audience. So sight, hearing, smell, taste and touch, and its directors and the actors collaboratively working can achieve this challenging thing. But you know how little that happens. Now, I can say to you, as somebody working in theatre and has done it professionally in every way, really, always, as a teacher, I've seen more rubbish theatre in my life than I've seen good theatre. It doesn't always work because those things are not all working on the same level. Either the actors aren't working in a team, the director hasn't put the vision across to the actors. We can usually tell when we come out of something live, any live performance really, wow, that somehow had a sense of its wholeness, itself. It's a key matter of preconception. I keep using that word, I can't even say the word. Anyway, right, I'm nearly there. The directors have to gain trust and cooperation from the company. Then they have to do likewise with audience. Each performer needs to sense themselves, physicality, and their intellectual responses. The director must reveal each unique skill in each company member, but make them all work together with it. For example, quite often, for a year or two, I used to get some pretty cool sort of sixth formers arrive in theatre studies at college, and they used to sit there, like we all are. I think we're pretty cool when we're 17. And I used to say, right, we're all going to get up now. We're going to do Michael Rosen's Bear Hunt, and we're going to, run around the studio. And they looked at me like I was, bananas. And basically, what I did with them was, this is just one tiny little moment, but it's explaining what it means to break down to make them more vulnerable. And not to, be mean to them, but to show them that one cannot hold things back. So, for example, I remember one day we had an Ofsted inspection. God, how many love those. And this Ofsted inspector arrived, and we were all running around doing the whole Bear Hunt, the Michael Rosen rhyming book. But we were acting it out, going around the space. And we were all 5-year-olds with American accents. And I think the Ofsted inspector thought I'd gone off my bonds because I had these sort of 18-year-olds and we were doing this. But actually what happened was they just had the biggest laugh. They all lost all their sort of side, and coolness. And they were all in it together. And from that on, they just, things like that are what I mean by the sort of games and silly things and the cliches that people talk about about how actors or student actors, they become trees. Actually, that's not funny at all, really. It's not, obviously actors get fed up with the way people, think that it is. It's actually far more important than that. It's about playing, exploring and, being innovative and being improvising, really, and finding imagination. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is, I hope you don't mind, is to take you, this is my final bit, take you to the opening of a play I love. Now, this play is called Playhouse Creatures. It's a play I've directed once, probably one I love most. I had an awful lot of girls. I had something like 28 girls in theatre study once for A-level. And I needed to find plays. I had a lot of plays to do all in about a month. And this one I found, it was by April D'Angelis, who's a very good female writer. And she had written a play about the first female actors, based around Nell Gwyn, who of course was a real actress, started as an orange seller and worked her way up to become the most famous actress at the time. So it's set in 1660. And what I'd like you to do is, I'm going to read the monologue from the opening, because I just love this monologue. It's not very long. I'll just get it off my phone. Hang on. You find it. I should have had it ready because, again, I didn't charge my phone either. So what am I like? Right, so let's get it. It's the monologue by a woman called... Go away, I don't want you. Okay. It's by a woman called a woman. I won't give you anything else away because I want you to do, when I read this monologue, I'd like you to, because I can't bring it to you, I can't present it to you, what you're going to do is to hear a radio, I suppose, aren't you? Hear a radio version. And I'd like you to, if you, however you want to really, but maybe close your eyes, it might help, to imagine what you see around you as this monologue is spoken. And I'd like you to maybe share, if you want to, afterwards at the end, what it is you saw. And I will then say to you, well, I won't say anything. I don't know what I'm going to say. We'll see. It's part of the experiment. Okay. So here we go. Let's find it. Sorry, guys. I think it's here. Just here we are. Here we are, guys. Sorry to keep you. Right, are you ready? I'm not even going to give you the context. All I'll say is that you're sitting in the round. That's probably one way to help you to imagine where you are, okay? So here we go. I'm going to play Doll Common. Once, this was a playhouse, and before that, a bear pit. On a hot day, I swear you could still smell the bears. They used to rag me. That ain't the bears, doll, that's the gentleman. But it was the bears, because upon occasion, as I swept, I came upon their hair, tufts of it, bunched up in corners, which I saved. As a small child, my father was the bear keeper. I remember the bears moaning at night and licking the wounds at their throats where the arms cut in and sighing. For while bears love to dance, they hate to do it for a whip. Indeed, under these conditions, I believe they preferred the fighting to the dancing, even as blood was spilt and death faced. Sometimes I still hear that cry, very faint and in the wind. I wouldn't be a liar if I told you that this place used to be packed to the nines. They all sat squashed on benches, which greatly facilitated the wandering of hands down breeches and bodices. Often the talk was like the roar of water and drowned out the stage. In winter you froze, and in summer you cooked. It was a foul place, really. But the punters came back and back, time after time. Louts and lords, lords and lads. Who could tell the difference? Not so long back, they burnt these places to the ground and pissed on the ashes. They swore they'd seen the last of them, but they sprang up again like mushrooms. My dad was the bear keeper. And one day, this bear turned on him. The whip came down and down on her, and still she came. She slashed his chest ear to ear. That night they took out her claws and teeth, ripped them out, and she howled and screamed and rocked in pain. It woke me and I ran in. There was blood on the floor. No, Dad, no, I says. And he said, you let one of them get away with it, and tomorrow none of them bears will dance. The bear had gone still and her head was hanging, and I said, why should you whip her? And he took my hand and he put it into the blood that was on the floor, and then he wiped more on my face. She dances and we eat meat, he said. Never let me hear you speak on it again. The blood was warm at first, and then it started turning cold on me, and it seemed to turn me cold. I never did say nothing again. Yeah, playhouse creatures, they called you, like you was animals. There you go. There. Now that's the opening monologue of this play, Playhouse Creatures. Are you still with me? I've got no idea. Are you all there?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, it's so weird talking into a screen when you can't hear anybody. Anyway, okay. So now, what I want, would anybody be prepared to share to me what they felt, they saw, felt? I can tell you what I did in my production, right? But that's just my vision as a director, how I saw it and what I did for the audience and the actors. But would anybody like to say what they saw, felt?
Before you even read that, I'd already been thinking about music hall.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you were talking about Greeks and that open air feeling, and the fact that there was something going on between the audience contributing, because I was sent to a drama school as a child practically, and it was all about learning parts and then teaching them. And one of the things I always loved about music hall, even though, you know, with my parents I used to watch the good old days and all this, was this strange to and fro between the audience, like Mary. And I also did lots of painting, illustrations for the, what's the place called? There used to be I used to paint for the nightclub. I've forgotten the name of the blooming nightclub now. They used to have a music hall night in the place. Obviously that wasn't the most, but they had it. And it was all Mary Lloyd. And as a result of doing them, I was quite interested in that music hall thing. So when I was listening to you, it was very much the sawdust and blood story, isn't it? It's very much the circus feeling. But in a kind of way, they did sometimes in music halls do things like bring animals on, and it was cross of things. And so I felt very much that, you know, the fakery being exposed in that, because it was about the young girl not wanting this to happen, it's part of what she grew up with. And, you know, so let's go on with the dancing with the bear, whether it's good or bad. So I think I saw some sort of musical circus thing. Anyway, I did close my eyes.
It was, I wasn't checking, I couldn't see. It was set in about 1670. So it was literally the beginning of the playhouses when women were first allowed to actually step on the stage. And Doll Common is a sort of symbolic character, but also is a character within the story to represent the older generation who are watching this. And she is seeing what happens to women when they do this, when they dare to do that. And she comes in and she's sweeping in. She's almost like the narrator of the play, but she's also the core of it in a way, because she's, you know, somebody observing from the outside. Anybody else want to say how would they, basically, as a theatre person, I would say to, back in the teacher mode, what would you put on stage there if now you know it's 1660? I mean, I can show you, out of interest, I wanted to show you, this was actually a poster for this play that I found online, which was very surprising to me, but also I love that, because that's a whole new take on it, isn't it? You know, now that poster is a different vision from the traditional version of doing that. I'm sure, I didn't see the show. It was a few years ago in Waterloo in London, a community theatre there. Now that's either saying, I mean, the play itself, obviously you haven't heard it all. The play itself is basically, talking about female gay, many things we discussed already actually in these things, as a piece of artwork. It's about the male gaze on females and how females negotiated that from right on, and how they're still doing it today. So it's a really relevant play. And I thought that's a really interesting one. Now, and this is an interesting one, a student version. That's a totally different, I mean, obviously these are just still versions for publicity, but they must have some sense of stuff. That's actually a beautiful picture in proper colour, but my oranges didn't come out. The orange looks rubbish. It's a beautiful colour thing, that, because, you know, the skin tones with the oranges are beautiful. So what I'm trying to show you there really is I mean, this will be more, say, a more traditional look of the actors in it, because that's more of a genuine costume in period.
Toddish.
Yeah, but no, when it was 60, it's earlier than that, way earlier than that. But originally, when I did it, I had to cobble together with what little budget I had, of course. But I'm talking about the senses here. Let's get back to this. So I put on stage, for example, I thought it was such a sensory play that I put on stage smells. I had incense burning throughout the theatre, and I had lights flickering, tiny little old-fashioned oily things, and looked like candles. And I had everything was sort of thrown together on the stage like it was backstage and things. The thing is, when you are putting on a piece of theatre work like this, you can't just think the text itself will give you lots of visuals, but there are no right or wrong ways to do it. That's what I'm trying to say. So what I found with that play is I really enjoyed it, because I actually had, in the interval, I had audiences were allowed to eat figs and drink little bits of coloured water, and it was a bit like an immersive thing, even though they had to sit in our studio in the college. It was the best we could do. But that's why I think theatre needs to continue, really, to give people much more immersive sensory experiences. That's I love text, and I love words, but I know that when I go to theatre now, I do not want to see two men standing, or two women really, sitting in a room for 3 hours talking. It just bores me sick, So I think you have to throw a lot. We've got to be a lot more creative really now. Of course we are being. Digital stuff is now marrying with live. It's all becoming quite incredible, isn't it? Anybody else want to share? Did anybody smell anything?
Gotcha just put something on, popped up, words.
Yeah, there's two things in the chat actually. So Caroline, Tasha's saying, I saw circus as they were in days gone by, gypsy type characters. So that's Tasha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, yes, the bear pits, of course. The bear pits in Shakespeare's time were absolutely horrific things to watch. Most people came to see the bears before they came to see the plays. And that's why they can find, bones of bears and all the food they used to eat when they excavate all these amazing theatres from the past. The bear pit, it's like cockfighting, the same thing. But the bear pits were they're a bit like gladiator sort of arenas, aren't they, when you think about it now? I'm trying to think of what the equivalent is now. Maybe something on telly, some of these awful reality shows, I don't know. Sort of between Big Top and Gladiator, yeah.
I think when I said about musical, what I was thinking of was Mary Lloyd and all these people.
Yes.
The boy upstairs in the gallery and all this. And there was this sense of...
Yeah. There's a real timeline. You're right, Julia.
The women had replaced the bears, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's the amazing timeline, really. Music hall is... I absolutely love music hall myself. I used to take my students to music hall in Leeds, and they used to think it was a bit, oh God, and yet when they went, they had the most fantastic experiences. But it is an incredible, it's a very visceral thing. It's a very sensory thing, music hall, because again, you still got that, I mean, Victorian times, obviously it's a Victorian thing where it was at its height, and they used to have, people used to eat like a cabaret mall, have massive, great long tables where hundreds and hundreds of people would all be eating their chicken legs, and this is, and the music hall in front of them.
So things think of that film Jekyll and Hyde with where he goes to the music hall and picks up the girl. Who's it in Jekyll and Hyde? Dave, you'd know the one I'm talking about. Wherever when he's not the doctor, when Jekyll turns into Hyde, he goes to the music halls, and it's.
They're a very good source of theatricality, aren't they, music halls? But what did people think of the idea of do people do you, as here people now, do you enjoy going to see things that expect more of you or give you more senses, or do you like just to hear text? I mean, some people do. Some people might prefer to go and see a play and listen to it. They used to call it, I'm going to hear a play. They didn't say go and see a play, because the words meant a lot more. It keeps going round and round, up and down and seesawing, this thing of the theatre. It's quite fascinating to me. Anyway, I didn't give you a chance to answer, sorry. Do
Caroline,
people... yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely what you're describing seems to me the ideal way of kind of experiencing theatre. And actually in your talk before this brilliant little exercise, what I thought you actually finally described to me, what I often wonder, you know, when it's just, to me, I always call it magic, you know, when a performance really grabs you and it's that special thing where everything just comes together. You know, the writing, the directing, the performances, the environment. I'm always absolutely taken by kind of stage design. It's always something I think like, how can you kind of create such a complex world with such few kind of wardrobes and a carpet and a light? And it always amazes me. And I think what you just described in your, you know, using that sense actually, I think is really interesting whether that sense enables a director to create that magic that kind of springs over into the audience, and it's because you use all the senses. It's brilliant. I never thought of that.
Your actors, you have to get your actors with you. You know, have to get them to believe that that they see what your vision is. And if you don't, that's when I think it doesn't work. And that's how I've been to so many where I've just gone, oh my God, we've got to go back in the second half. You know, like I'm harsh on it because I care about it so much. I think, you know, and when it's good, it's just, for me, there's no other thing really. So, nothing is good. But it's not really that good that often, I don't think.
Caroline, surely why there's so many theatres in the round now, to get that feeling.
Sorry, say it again. Sorry, Michelle. I can see you.
I was thinking that it's why so many theatres are doing things in the round. Yes, so that they can come through the audience and they can interact as they come down to the stage, and it gives much more of that feeling.
It certainly does, yeah. I find just looking at something end on, unless it's mesmerisingly acted, you know, I just find it tedious now. I'd rather watch a screen, you know. So, yeah. I things I love as well, so. Anyway, I hope you understood why I was trying to use that word and trying to it suddenly hit me that, oh my God, yeah, that's what I've always wanted, you know, when I work, to get everything all coming together and bodies in space and not just words on a page. Because quite often when people think they're going to do a play or we're going to do a play, they think the script, it's all in the script, it's here, it's the script. It's not, it's out there.
And here. It's got to be inside you. You've got to become that person. I think. But I just want to say, it's not quite the same, but when I lived in London, they had a Shakespeare festival and it was in Southwark, and they used one of the pubs. And the beauty was that the loo was at the back. So all the way through the play, people were just getting up and going to the back, and then there'd be this, and I just thought, God, you know, it feels like in time 17th century theatre or something. They'd have pissed.
Performed in loos, don't worry, I performed. Oh, that's great. It's real though. It's real, isn't it? I like it when people. I like it. It's like in a gig, you know. It's the same thing when you get people going in and out of, you know.
Isn't there an expression that says going back about the third wall, the proscenium arch?
Fourth wall.
Fourth wall. Yeah, which is like between.
Yeah, in traditional theatre, you've got the back, you know, the big two sides, and then you, the audience, is the fourth wall. It's called breaking it. When you talk through that, you're breaking the fourth wall. You're talking out into it. You've broken it out.
Yeah.
Brilliant, excellent.
That's the sort of work I like best. I like talking out, you know, I like being out there with them. I like to see I like to smell them, that's what they say.
Caroline, do you still direct then? Have you got a play? I'm absolutely intrigued now, and I want to see you in action.
Having found this play again, you know, I haven't thought about it for a while. I would love to do this one, but I haven't got any outlet at the minute, of course, and I don't know. I mean, I've been doing a little bit of performing again, which has been grand for me, you know. I'm the oldest one in a group of people who've been doing stuff. And I realised how much I loved it again. And gradually, I did start to not interfere with it a bit, but try to get them to be a bit more cohesive without, because it isn't my group really. It is my group, I'm in it now, but I wasn't there as the director. So again, you know, I'm bossy, I always have been. So it's inevitable, isn't it? And especially if you've taught, you can't help it. It's terrible. But no,
I think we should kind of...
Caroline, they did call on your expertise because I share a studio with Anna Bean. I remember you coming in, and I'd never seen you do anything like that before. And it was quite amazing because you were kind of helping Michelle. It might have even been Leonora Carrington thing.
Yes, it was. She was doing her.
You were helping her, and I was quite impressed, actually, Caroline. I'll be honest, because I've never seen you do that side of things.
Well, no, of course not. I mean, I think it's a misconception that people think, I mean, obviously, people know what art teaching is, I suppose, don't they, generally? Because they've mainly had an art teacher. But drama tutoring and teaching is not what people think it is. You know, they think it's about teaching people to be good actors. It's not actually. It's about other things. That's another whole issue. But it's about them, about people believing in something and working in a group. So that's why the transferable skills are so fantastic. For example, I'll finish in a minute because I don't want to take any more time. But this happened to me only yesterday. I was on my vac shift, and for the vaccination shift, and I was just chatting away to this lovely young guy who was working with me we were doing up and getting people moving on, etc. And I said to him, chatting away. He was a bit cool at first. And I was just like a grandma to him, and he starts chatting. So I said, are you college? Yeah, I'm going to police college, he said. I said, oh, that's interesting. I've never met anybody going to police college, so we have a chat. And he said, yeah. And he said, what did you do? And I said, for many, many years I was a drama tutor. And he said, oh, I love drama, he said. Loved it. Did it for GCSE. Do you know, he said, it changed me completely, he said. I became confident and I could talk to people. And I knew how to work in a team. And I thought, if only people really, it's like all of the arts, they all do that too, don't they? Let's be honest. And I thought, if only somebody would finally stand up and say, yes, they're as important as anything, And he said, I was so glad I did GCSE. And if you've seen him, you wouldn't have thought, he was the least bit in that sort of world. But he was so lovely the way he said that to me. Just like, oh, I loved it, he said. And I thought, yes, it is really valid and it is really important. Because I've forgotten, because it's a few years since I stopped,
He'll probably find it very useful because he's got to step into the role of being a cop.
Totally.
Yeah. Spectating,
said to him, good luck, and I hope you keep your confidence up. I thought, God, what we've got ahead of him, But it was just a thing to remind myself, really.
I did a play when I went back to my old school to do a term filling in for teaching there. And they were having a fete. They had one every year. And I actually did St. George and the Dragon. But we did it in the grounds.
Yeah.
And when the double dragon came out, it was scary because they had the head on a really long broomstick that could actually go out at people. So the people watching couldn't stay just as an audience.
I know.
And it was
that's the beauty of live stuff, That's why I'm so desperate to see something again, because you just don't know. It's the uncertainty of it that I love. You never know if it's going to work or not, from 5 minutes to the next. Whereas with film and digital, it's done, it's there, and they wouldn't put it out if it wasn't any good, would they?
When I taught in my the first school that I ever taught,
terrible generalisation, but
I was just going to say, when I taught in the first school that I taught in, and this was before kind of union action and everything, and we did performances at school. Yeah. And it was so lovely the way that we all kind of pitched in, and it transformed the school. So I remember once, one of the first ones we did was Guys and Dolls. And I'm quite shy, so I'd never have wanted to be on stage or acted. But I painted the background, and all the art department did like the scenery, and all the lessons were that. And my friend did the choreography, and someone else did the music. And it was like everyone could pitch in with something and make a contribution to the whole. And I remember looking back and thinking, oh my God, I worked 70 hours that week. But it was a pleasure because you were part of a bigger something. You could do your thing, your little aspect of it, and someone else, but the whole thing came together and transformed the school hall. And the teaching relationships were lovely because everyone was just painting a bit of board or sewing something, and it was fab, really, looking back. Yeah.
What I think all schools should be doing now. They should be doing things outside in massive tents, making massive productions. That's what I think they should be doing. Sod the bloody exams this year. That's my. There you go. I'm a bit weird, me.
I love that. That's a brilliant idea. And I think, I mean, you've touched on so many areas, isn't it? Just by kind of talking about, you know, your experience as a director and theatre and performance. And I mean, just a couple of thoughts to round this up before we move on. First of all, thank you so much for bringing this to the table and really kind of enlightening and opening our eyes to the multisensory experience that theatre is and can be. But also, because you said, you know, that misconception of what theatre actually is, it's not just about learning texts and, you know, learning words. It's about experiencing your body and your senses and then kind of translating that into something that the audience can feel and experience themselves. So thank you. As well, I think never ever call yourself bossy. I have a rule ever. It's, as Julia said, you know, it's knowledge, experience, and probably a talent for leading. Always embrace it. Yeah, I don't like it when women say that. Oh, I'm bossy.
That for years.
It's a good thing. Yes, and again as well, I think, and that's probably a topic maybe we could pick up one day about the value of the arts and how some students who love doing theatre end up being policemen, you know, and where that comes from, you know, kind of why has he chosen that when he kind of clearly loves theatre?
I know.
You know, anyway, I find that interesting, you know, kind of, it's always how do people choose their careers and what they end up in. And I know we've actually touched upon that in a previous ones, isn't it? The obstacle.
If I meet him again on my shift tomorrow, I'll ask him. Because that was a question I didn't quite get to. You know? I might save him yet, you never know.
Well, that's the question. Is it a saving or not?
No.
But anyway, okay, thank you so much, Caroline. That was brilliant. Now, who would like to go next? Any volunteers? Otherwise, I'm gonna. Is there a volunteer? No. Okay. Is everybody giving? Is everybody wanting to do a talk? Or if yeah, okay, then excellent. Then I'll pick Roger actually.
Okay.
Got a glimpse of his. I'd like to know what it was about. Very secretive. Right.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Right.
Right. Okay. Just bear with me a sec.
Yeah. Sorry, I did jump that on you. Yeah, so take your time. I mean, we'll obviously run into next week again, so no pressure.
Oh, sorry, I just realised how long that was. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's been brilliant. You know, and I think we just need to go with the flow.
This is on.
Okay. Right. Well, first of all, a message from the Canadian crooner. Okay, in that song, John Denver manages to list situations that can overload our senses. Balzac supposedly collapsed on arriving in Venice, not from exhaustion, but due to the assault on his senses by seeing, hearing, smelling the place. And to this day, the French doctors recognize Balzac's syndrome as a condition. Last week, Caroline told us that the sense she'd most hate to lose was her sight. Now, I'm fairly overdrawn in the bank of senses. Cataract problems in both of my eyes have been at least temporarily remedied, but provided me with a taster of the obstacles that beset many with a sight loss. For 18 years, I lived with a woman, my mother, who was totally stone deaf. I know firsthand how debilitating this is too, especially as I am now deaf in my left ear also. Julia can tell you that for a long time, I've had a significantly reduced sense of smell. Now, if I could remedy these problems, I'd certainly do so in the same order: sight, hearing, smell. Having placed the sense of smell in last position, I'd have to say that it's not that easy a decision. A loss of sight and hearing present far more everyday practical obstacles, but a life without smell is certainly a very much greyer one. The barrage of olfactory sensations at Hull Fair, fresh baked bread on Argyle Street, rain after a drought, distant wood smoke. The list is pretty long, and the sensations often equal to those produced by exposure to art or music. After all, the olfactory bulb is a bundle of neurons that transmit information from the nose to the brain and is part of the limbic system, which supports emotion, long-term memory, and adrenaline flow. Little wonder a whiff of dope emitted from a window of a parked car can immediately trigger images of long-gone teenage hijinks. Of course, there is the downside. That's the whiff of a decomposing animal when walking down a country lane. A rotten potato in the bag you just purchased from the supermarket. Mercifully, these are short-lived, unlike possibly the worst odor I've ever experienced, which assaulted your nostrils, even from the confines of a fast-moving bus, every time you passed the Carbon Black Works in Portennant en route to Swansea. It certainly lived up to its name. Everything was black. Vanta black. It looked like the place where the devil melted down sinners and produced a god-awful stink, 24/7. Once, in what now appears a quite bizarre episode, the long-suffering local residents took jars of the air to Downing Street to share with the powers that be. Mercifully, it's now long since been demolished, but the stench still lingers in some sort of olfactory cellar in my brain. I suppose that more hasn't been done in the way of olfactory art. I'm aware of experiments in the world of cinema in the past with smell-o-vision and aroma-rama, movies with accompanying scents to enhance the viewing experience. But these really never really got off the ground, due mainly to the associated practical difficulties, with presentations being spoiled by distracting hissing noises or the sound of others in the audience sniffing loudly in attempts to gain the full experience. Little wonder then that it was voted one of the 100 most useless inventions by Time magazine readers in the 1960s. Attempts at multimedia experiences weren't new. Back in 1886, Rimmel scent was sprayed into the auditorium of the Alhambra Theatre in London during the magic dance of the fairy acorn. Nice. I admit that I was quite unaware of any artists who had ventured into the field of olfactory art. A session on the internet quickly educated me that several have, and I'm sure Jill will already know that one of them was no other than the man himself, Marcel Duchamp, who oversaw the roasting of coffee behind the screens at the 1938 Exposition Internationale de Surrealism, doubtlessly pleasing visitors with the smell of Brazil. In 1965, Ed Kinehouse exhibited his tableau of the Beanery enhanced with accompanying odours of cigarette smoke, greasy cooked food, and urinal cake. These do seem to have been gestures aimed at enhancing the impact of otherwise more acceptable, if challenging, examples of contemporary art of the time. More recently, artists have produced work in which smell takes a more central role. Like the Belgian artist Peter de Cooper, who highlighted the issue of air pollution with his piece Smoke Cloud in 1913. Visitors are invited to climb a small ladder and place their heads into a cloud containing polluted air. A bit like a dark version of the observation globe in the aquarium at the Deep in Hull. The message of the piece is laudable, but it, and most, if not all of the limited number of works I have now seen, appear clumsy or cumbersome, rather like virtual reality glasses, which in reality, nothing like virtual in their reality. So olfactory art is a more elegant. So olfactory art in a more elegant format remains still untapped resource. The next big thing, it has emotive potential to the power of Rothko, but I fear it may sadly still be some way off and may require massive technological or neurological advantages by mankind to happen.
Great.
Oh, it's wonderful.
That's great.
That was
No.
brilliant.
My son's presentations are a bit like yours, Roger.
Oh, yeah. I take that as a compliment.
Really good. I love his presentations. I might get him to do them for me.
That's great. Lovely.
I've been living with this dry sense of humour for a very long time.
Roger,
Yeah. Smell.
Roger, I was just going to ask, the plant that you smelled,
Yes.
what did it actually produce, if anything?
Carbon, I believe. It was the carbon black plant.
The carbon black plant?
It's called Carbon Black Factory, and I presume it made carbon.
It was oil, obviously oil-based, though, wasn't it? That sound. I can just smell it. I can feel. I can smell it now. Was it not mixed with oil? Just
It had its own very special smell.
Oh, God! It looks. Was that picture of it? That was the picture.
That was it. That was it.
It looked like hell.
I was just going to say it would have to go a long way to be a rendering plant, which is my smell of the century. Because that was absolutely all pervasive. When I got home, I had to take my clothes off literally and put them in the laundry, even though I'd been wearing an overall, because it had seeped into my clothes. It's the most horrendous smell experience I've ever had in my life.
Would that be bones as well then, Dave?
Bones, tissue,
yeah,
tree, all
right.
kind of things.
No explanation needed. Yeah. Okay.
Unbelievable.
I know.
I thought it was brilliant, Roger. I loved that.
Julie and I lived in a flat in Plain Street at one point, and the fellow that lived in the flat downstairs worked on one of the pig farms out at Skirton. And he'd come back and he just walked through the corridor into his flat. It was for more than an hour afterwards. He went into that corridor.
I think that's when you lost your sense of smell, Rod.
Probably. I used to have a student who worked in a fish and chip shop, bless her, and she used to come the next day, and she just could not get the smell off her clothes. Every night she had to, she had to do it for, basically she needed the money, and the student used to give her such a hard time. I remember her, so I can see her now, and she said, "What can I do? What can I do?" She used to have these, proper things in her head and everything, and she could never get rid of it. It's that oil, isn't it? Fish oil.
Jill used to rub herself with lemons after she'd worked at the fish factory. She used to rub herself all over with lemons after she'd worked,
The sense of disgust is an interesting thing, isn't it? The sense of disgust. I mean, I think that's a fascinating topic in itself, discussed. What is, because, you know, you could break down sense, a smell, can't you, into beauty, you know, smells we all go, oh, they're lovely, and smells we go, oh my God, and they're taboo in a way, aren't they? They're taboo. Quite interesting, isn't it? Everything's interesting as we talk about it.
It's how different people perceive them differently as well.
Yeah.
I hate when my hair smells of, like when somebody burns bacon or toast and my hair starts smelling. But it's because, I had this girl at work at school who used to run a pub, and she would always smell of food, and it was just really unpleasant, isn't it?
Stale food, yeah.
But there's some interesting comments as well in the chat. This is kind of a new thing now. I'm not sure how we deal with it.
How are you doing this? I can't see. You just type something.
That's great. So Lee Scratch Perry was burning incense. I think you mean incense. In front of the stage.
But the difference in us to animals, say, which love all smells, they don't think of them as being good or bad.
No.
It is just something that teaches them about the land around them, you know. And
used to do the same for us.
Can we?
It used to do the same for us, and I've touched on that. We used to rely on our senses, but there is such a cacophony now of stuff going on that I think we've lost a lot of our sensitivity about a lot of things.
Well, it's probably when they didn't wash their clothes or their bodies. I think losing your sense of smell at that time was pretty good.
Mm. I know my mum used to say to me that in the war, for example, when before night, materials that were not made of man-made, everybody had cotton or wool, didn't they, normally, in the winter? And she said, you know, you'd go into a train or a bus or be in the tube when she was in the Blitz in London. She often used to talk about the smell in the Blitz down in the tube ways and tubes, and how absolutely overpowering it was of wet woolen bodies. And I often think of that. And my dad had I remember a woolen overcoat, and I can smell that now when it used to get wet, because we didn't have, you know.
Tartan. They used to soak tartan in urine.
Yeah.
And when it got wet, and I have to say, I had a boater for school, God help me, which when it got wet, which you obviously got summer rain, you would then sit on the bus and everybody would stare at you because the smell emitted from the glue on these boaters was absolutely disgusting. And it would make your hair smell as well. Great.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on well, I guess we could go on forever. I just realized actually, because we've picked such a huge topic, isn't it?
Yeah, which is another massive
way. You know, we could easily just go into detail, and there's so much attached to it, as you said, Roger. You know, memories, isn't it? Is such a huge connection with smell, which, I'm sure we all have such.
I could go on forever about
archive of memories associated with smells. It's enormous, isn't it? But it's also fascinating, though, how hard it is to actually incorporate smell into art, apart from possibly theatre. Is literally, I mean, it's nice that you kind of pointed out a few examples of where they try to incorporate smell into other art forms. And I thought, actually, one question about that, sorry, I forgot his name now, the 1965 artwork. Was that a photograph or a painting? Or how did that actually work?
The beanery.
I know.
It was like a tableau. It was like a recreation of a bar.
It was a physical thing.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff was like that. Sort of.
Okay.
Actually, I think it's in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
I was rather looking forward to going to see it when I visited Amsterdam, and I was told it was closed down for renovation or something. But it was the biggest disappointment of my life, because it was really a piece that I really wanted to experience.
I also remember one of the first art trips was to Amsterdam, and it was in the Stedelijk Museum, because I remember seeing that piece and it having a real impact on me. At sort of 17, 18, sort of having a look at and I just remember like this, but like you say, the smells and the sort of colour, all the colours were brown, sort of and like everything was really stale, and the faces and things. But yeah, I remember that. I remember when I saw the picture.
His wife made a great deal of the mannequins. And I know that, you know, you could argue they were his ideas, but there is definitely, there's another cowboy one somewhere. And she made loads of this stuff, which makes me wonder. Because I don't think he could do hands and things or something. So she used to do all the more difficult stuff. He'd just have the idea and then set it to work.
It definitely did conjure a world, that painting. That was fantastic. I love work that conjures something, what I like, you know, that does conjure something other. And that was definitely that world. And you believed in it, didn't you? It had like a theatre piece, a completeness to it. I'd like to walk into that theatre piece. It was good.
Is it there then? That picture that with the heads, the clock heads, was that an installation? So was that like a physical installation? Can you walk into it?
Yeah.
And is it there like a long period of time? And how do they keep
Had one
it
in the
smelling?
National Gallery, which was one of his, and that was of a prostitute. What was it called? Something Street. German name. It was a prostitute. And there were women clocks.
It's like Hamburg or something, a red light district or something.
Yeah.
Amsterdam.
And you walk through it the same, and it had women with clocks for faces.
Yeah. What was the artist called again?
Kleinholz.
Kleinholz.
I think it is a permanent exhibit. Permanently
in Amsterdam. Yeah.
In Amsterdam.
Oh, it's permanent. How do they keep the smell?
Sorry?
How do they keep it smelling like that then, if it's there permanently?
It seems a bit similar to, you know, like the Jorvik Viking Centre, where they've got like this. It's a bit like, it smells a bit like that, doesn't it?
That's the generic smell of sense of like a fake smell where they've tried to create a traditional smell.
They spray it all the time. I've heard that.
And what about the Marcel Duchamp one? So what was that? Was that also kind of an installation, not a painting?
Well, I only glanced. I mean, Jill probably, but he was at that he decided he was going to roast coffee in the background while the poet was performing. So.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting, isn't it? It's just looking at different art forms and how many of our senses they can possibly touch, isn't it? I think at the moment theatre, I guess musicals are definitely winning.
Well, yeah. Possibly, not always, sometimes none at all.
Excellent. Oh, thank you very much. I think we have time for another one. So I would like to, does anybody want to volunteer? I'm going to try again. No, okay. So, May, yes?
Mine's quite quick.
I was going to actually pick you, so that's quite good. Good, perfect.
Right. Okay. I've just picked 3 bits of artwork out that I sort of associate with centres. The first one is a drawing, and it's done by one of our ex-learners from quite a few years ago, and it's really fascinating drawing of a hand with each finger completely different.
Yes.
Like trees as well.
It's webbed as well. So they're webbed fingers.
Yeah.
But the details on each one are very specific, obviously, aren't they? And you're different, yeah. Wow.
So one. Yeah, that's right. It's really amazing. It's one of our learners that we did lots of exhibitions with, and we used this on a flyer for an exhibition, and I think it was 2010, maybe 9 or 10, and that was, I think it was at Artling Gallery, and he did lots of he did lots of I think I've shown you some of his work before actually, and he was a prolific. So I can't say it.
Prolific.
Yeah. Drawing. He did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drawings, but they're on quite thin paper. So we did we attached them to the wall of the gallery with those little tiny miniature bulldog clips. So they kind of like with the, like they sort of moved with the air. And they were absolutely beautiful in a row, in a few rows sort of above each other. And that was one of them. But it just really kind of, it's just a really amazing, when I look at it.
Egon Schielish.
I
It is.
Yeah. Did you think, was there a stimulus for that, or did that come from them innately without any, calling for it?
No, he just sat and it just came out of his head. He didn't really look at any other material or anything. It was just totally from his own sort of, he just immersed himself within drawing and just did. His drawings were really unusual, but we love that one because it's all about kind of individuality, isn't it? And a group of people that are all kind of different. So each finger is a bit like but they're all joined together on one hand.
My mum used to work teaching at a nursery education, and she knew a lot about art development in little children, babies as they start. And she said, everybody knows this probably when you've had children or see them, that they start with the hands when they draw, because they're looking up at your hands a lot, and all when they're babies, they see your hands, their fingers come towards you. That's why fingers and hands are quite important. I mean, that's, to me, says something about a lot of things about that. I'm small, these are hands coming. It's like children's drawings to me.
They look quite gruesome. The fingers look quite gruesome. They look like they've been through the wars.
We might be reading stuff in probably, but it's just interesting because I know that I then started to look at my own children's drawings then, and I realised they did do a lot of hands. Their hands were really big, they were really big in comparison to the rest of the body.
Yeah, my little boy, who's just 7, hates this image. He finds it really scary.
Yes, I think it is menacing. It's menacing, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, so the next one is also another drawing done by another learner from a long time ago. I think it's 2008. And he was from a travelling community, and he did loads of really amazing drawings and paintings. He did loads for Kursler in the Art in Prisoner Ward in London, and we had quite a lot of these drawings and paintings and prints, and this was a monoprint. But he did that. It's just fascinating the way, because he talks about his family always being together. They were always in the similar sort of space, sort of all round in the caravans, and like always in each other's spaces all the time. So he kind of draws a lot of his family, and these they look like little tiny people off the side of this one. Always makes me feel it's like animals feeding, isn't it? Like little tiny piglets feeding, or the kind of
again, it's a bit menacing.
But some of them have really big long arms.
Yeah,
and then some of them have got no arms at all.
That's right. And we've got loads of these drawings around at work, but unfortunately this one hasn't got it. But this learner had one eye, and he lost his eye when he was very, very young, his other eye. And he used to draw. Whenever he drew himself within the drawing, he would draw instead of he would draw the other eye as instead of 2 lines, he would draw them that way, so vertically. So he'd draw one eye and then he'd draw the other eye vertically like that. So we always used to pick out where he would put himself within the drawings. But unfortunately, I looked, and this is the only copy that I've got. And it's not on that one, but we always found it really interesting, the way that he would depict himself with the vertical 2 lines.
That reminds me of the David Lynch film Eraserhead.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's fantastically detailed for a moment.
It is amazingly detailed.
An etching or something, how he's managed to keep those figures white, pure white.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Lots of
know.
variation.
Brilliant.
There's real depth in it, isn't there? Real
Text
depth.
back
Mm.
to the sentence, and then we've introduced that texture. That's impressive.
It's really good. Isn't
Strong sense of design.
There
Yeah,
is.
he's absolutely brilliant. He was he did them all. I think they're all A2 size. So this is just a print off it, so like a copy, you know, like a printed out on a computer. But they're all sort of A2 sizes, monoprints that he did. But he,
I mean, what's overall sense to people? How would you, if you had to think of a sense that you would, how would you describe that? It's claustrophobia, is it? Is that a sense?
No, I think it looks more like the arms are protective. It's a community. It's keeping everybody together. It's sort of.
What sense is it though? Because it's.
I'm probably playing amateur psychologist there, but it's even without knowing that, I could tell it was some sort of community before it has that feeling of a sort of group. It's very much a group, isn't it? I mean, it could be a bit Auschwitz-y as well, like people, could be quite dark, but it's nevertheless got that.
It doesn't feel dark.
No, it doesn't really.
It doesn't feel dark at all. That it's daily life.
Yeah, I think so. I just said it could be in case, somebody else is seeing something I'm not seeing. But I think it looks like a community.
Yeah,
I just think it's funny, there's arms and not arms, and then elongated legs, and it's very detailed, actually. It really
I wonder what you take from it is what you meant there, because it does. You see in other pictures, there's the one of it arched across, the one of it, the image, and that one looks sort of protective and like safety. But then the other ones where they're kind of like laid right across each other, it seems sort of, I don't know, something that's less protective about that. Something that's a bit. Yeah,
I think it's a mix to me. It's a real mix, as Michelle said. A mix of life's, good and bad, really.
Yeah, and all the things that are going on around the edges are threatening, almost. Or like the lads or something that are going on around the edges. They're not the family. Maybe it's.
Yeah. I think he did a lot of things. He did talk about his family a lot, but then obviously when he made this, he was within a prison environment with lots of people in close proximity as well.
Yes.
That could have been influenced that a bit.
To me, the people with no arms, it looks like they're the ones who they've got no sense of, the people with the arms are the ones who do the action. And if you're armless, you're vulnerable, aren't you? In a way, don't you think? That's what I get from that.
Yeah, because if you fall over, you wouldn't be able to stop yourself. And the third one is just a piece of work by Annette Messager, the French artist who I absolutely love her work, and I discovered it sort of early 90s and just really love it. And it's the piece with, she used lots of knitted gloves, and then each finger has a pencil sticking out from the end.
Wow. Oh, wow. How big is that in real life? Do you know?
The size of the glove, so it's quite large. She does installation work.
Yeah.
So each one is a real sized glove, and she did a lot. She does. I mean, I've got a book in the house, but I've got to bring it out.
What's her name again? Sorry.
It's Annette Messager. So Messager. Messager. She's really worth looking up. She's absolutely amazing.
MESSHER.
It's MESSSAGER. Messager.
Is she French? Is she French? It sounds it.
She's French. Yeah, Annette Messager. Yeah.
Lisa, is she the artist who, I might have got her muddled up with someone else, but is she the artist who painted herself and camouflaged against different backgrounds? That might
She
be
did. She does lots of. No, I don't think so. But she does lots of tattoo things and body and on. She does lots of sort of fine drawings on bits of pieces of bits of body, and then photographs them, and then hangs the photographs on bits of black cotton, all on top of each other. But they're all kind of installation pieces, and she uses lots of lots of little stuffed animals and books and children's toys, like discarded children's toys. But they're really amazing.
I don't quite know. I don't find I know what that is trying to communicate to me. Actually, knowing it's gloves and pencils, I'm trying to get a sense of what that is.
Well, for me, it's just really sensory. It's like the you know, obviously it's a skull, it's the shape of the skull as well, but the feeling of knitted gloves and a sharp sort of pencil on each finger.
Okay, yeah, that's very opposite, isn't it? That's very opposite.
Like fingernails, but pencils are fingernails. As fingernails.
And then the feeling that each finger could draw, you know, they could potentially draw something and make a mark with each one. It feels all kind of, it's more of a sensory sort of. Let me get closer.
Can you say sensory, Lisa? Because obviously we just kind of looked at senses, you know, smell, taste, seeing, hearing. But so when you say that this to you feels really sensory, and you say feel, which sense, you know, as actually kind of, which sense is it? Is it kind of visual that translates into kind of the feeling? Or do you kind of taste something because it's gloves and you, so, you know, what does it, is this for you kind of an artwork that kind of touches all the senses or kind of one sense in particular? Or do you think she used all her senses when the artist actually did the work?
I mean, for me, it's interesting you say that, because this really keeps saying about sensory, but I'm not really. But I think what you first said, really, something visual that makes you feel a certain way, or makes you kind of react, your body sort of have a good sort of feeling about something. So I suppose
hands, haven't they, in a way? I've just realized all the ones you've shown have something to do with hands. And because I guess you as an artist, I mean, you're cutting and you're drawing, you are, I would say you're a visual artist, isn't it? So you, I guess, oh, sorry, it's interesting.
Interesting, isn't it?
It's the way that it's sort of, because it's hands, and normally you would expect fingernails at the end of fingers, and you kind of think of fingernails maybe on a skull, you immediately sort of think, well, that's sort of a weird scratchy skull picture with fingernails, and then you realize it's pencils, and pencils are like the opposite, and they're creative and they're beautiful potentially. You know, you wouldn't think of them as scratchy, threatening or scary, but putting the two things together when you've already thought like fingernails, skull, and then you kind of think scratchy pencils, it's like the pencils are the artist's enemy in some way, or they're like, they see them as a negative thing.
But I'm sure that if you saw it as an actual thing rather than a flat image on paper, you would get a completely different feeling.
Yeah.
I can't help thinking that it's probably because of something I'm going to do, but your hands, if you think of early cave paintings and things, these things would have been done with your fingers. But with the sort of, we've now become people who use pencils. As I'm going a sort of intellectual way with it more, that our fingers are no longer good enough. We have to have pencils, we have to have brushes. She could have done the same thing with paintbrushes, or although they would have been soft.
Yeah, they wouldn't be scratchy in the same way.
Scratchy and sharp.
Maybe it's
sensory.
a totem keeping death at bay, because it's a skull head, let's be honest, right? So maybe it's a sort of totem. If you create art, you know, it's a totem, like the third eye, where you're you're saying, come and get, you're putting that eye out there like Mexicans do, whatever they call that eye. It's that to me. It's like saying I can be creative with even, and I'm keeping, because the only real thing is death and taxes, isn't it? All that. To me, that's a bit like that. It's a bit like saying, if I create, I can go on.
Hold back.
It makes me think, what would it be like to draw with gloves on or write with gloves on? Like I want to go away and do a drawing with a pair of big thick gloves on.
Yeah.
It also makes me think that the drawing is drawing itself somehow. I know it's not a drawing, but the image is making it.
Oh, yeah. Automatic drawing type of thing.
Yeah.
There's occasional coloured gloves in there, isn't there? And are the pencils colourful as well?
Yeah, they're all coloured pencils actually. That are used, and there is a lot of sort of links to childhood and like within her work. So they're like children's coloured pencils, and then kind of knitted gloves, sort of kids knitted gloves, and but yet that it's a skull, so it's kind of a little. Her work's always got a bit of an edge.
Innocence versus experience. Here we are, back on that one, maybe.
It reminds me of
kind of interesting. It's you telling me that it's knitted gloves and that these are children's pencils. Different things, like I can't help it. It's coming to my mind that Chloe did this thing with a friend at, what was it, Glastonbury, where they built tents out of rubber gloves. And I thought the whole thing was quite revolting, actually, when I saw it. And they were all made, but now you've told me they're wool, and somebody put Fluffy Monster on there, and I can see it's got a fluffy, slightly fluffy feel to it, which is in contrast to the image of a skull, really.
So pencil's a way of communicating, and if it's a skull, it's dead. So you've got that funny.
It's a definite contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know why now I thought that it was making itself. I think I connected it to something one of my students made years and years ago when I first started teaching at college. And I used to do something about the history of chairs, design of chairs. And then they had to design a chair for a famous artist or something. So they'd have to research the artist, something along those lines. And this student made a chair out of a ball of wool and knitting needles. So the chair was making itself. And I must have like unconsciously connected it with the woolen gloves and the pencils, which are a bit like knitting needles.
Yeah.
But I've just worked out why I made that connection.
Is it a hanging, Lisa? A hanging or a hanging?
She I first saw her work at the Arnolfini in Bristol in about 1992 or 3 or something, and she always goes and installs it on the walls in the gallery, so there will have been attached to the wall. And then she has lots of free. I've got a postcard I'm just looking at. I've got her stuff all over the place.
Yes,
that's another one of hers.
Wow,
that's quite a well-known image of. She does lots of sort of tattoo sort of things on body parts, and then what she'll have, that's like a photograph that she's worked into with ink, and she would she'd have that attached to a piece of black cotton and hanging from the ceiling with a group of about like 500 others all hanging next to each other, it's kind of all like hanging in like a circle with all the black cotton, so that the photographs make a circle and all the cotton sort of sticks up from that. It's really amazing work, and she's still on the go.
Sort of tell now you've shown that she's got a preoccupation. She's preoccupied somehow with mark making, with with the pencils. I think if I'm going to look her up. But I imagine when you see all her work together, you will see a kind of flow to it and a pattern to what is preoccupying her. Because my experience is most artists become completely obsessed with one thing. And and even when they try and do something different, it still refers to their preoccupation. And
a lot of oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, that's all right. I'm waffling on.
A lot of her, like this one's called My Trophies. So she does lots of the like little, like really fetishistic sort of like like photograph that she sort of embellishes and works on.
They're disturbing. I think if I saw a lot of those hands, I'd find them disturbing.
A lot of her work is quite.
That's a good artist. Disturbing, isn't it? I mean, I can't help saying that because my daughter and I seem to try and outdo one another without a shock one another.
No, that's been great. I think as well, actually, Lisa, what you've managed to do in a way is a little bit challenge kind of my previous statement around, what art form can touch most of our senses. And I think I kind of have to, I think I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to be surprised as to what might that be, because you've just illustrated that visual art, just pure visual art, can have that effect as well on us, through seeing something, we relate through our other senses as well. We don't not necessarily have to touch something, but actually seeing something gives us that sensation of touch. And it gives us, through kind of our memories, maybe even a kind of a smell and the memory, kind of thinking of those gloves and the wool and the wetness. I'm sure everybody kind of remembered what wet gloves as a kid kind of smell like. In the crayons and the pencils, isn't it? You kind of get a distinct smell. Maybe not a taste, but maybe a taste as well, actually. So, maybe songs come up when you think of it. So, thank you. I think those were a couple of really, all three of them were really powerful images that connected us to our senses. So, that was brilliant. So
I've only just found the chat and it's so interesting.
Thank you everybody actually for contributing in the chat as well. And I think because we can save the chat, so it's kind of a little record as well of what people have been thinking and talking. In general, I always find it hard to incorporate the chat into a conversation. So happy for everybody to just have their own little conversations.
Glennie said it looks like stigmata.
Yes, definitely.
That's
like a cat, a velvety paw with a claw.
I think artists in general, painters, obviously we're talking about in the past, right from art history from day one, have revealed incredibly sensory experiences to us. I mean, there's one painting that's always, whenever I see it, I literally shiver, and I don't like to look at it. And it's one of Bocklin's paintings. Do you know Hans Bockling? Is it called Bockling? Bocklin? And it's of a monster coming out of a rock, and mermaids and would you believe, Julia, and strange rocks and things like that. And it just absolutely terrifies me. The atmosphere it creates to me is of my nightmares. So I think artists have done that, a long time.
People are fascinated by horror because our eldest son used to always open this art book we had to this picture. Can you remember this, Roger? Of a hanging man. He used to always open it, and I started to think, my God, I'm going to have to take him to therapy or something, because he just opened it. But he opened it because he liked being scared. And there's a lot of things in that, isn't there, about...
Doctor the fella getting an electric shock.
Oh, God, yes, in the do-it-yourself book. The guy getting the electric shock. And this is what will happen if you put your finger, that's your fault. It's doing that when he played with electric, which he's now an engineer, so it didn't do much good.
That's interesting. Maybe that's something to cover, because actually Saskia's absolute favorite painting, when she was tiny, we moved to Hull when she was 4, so we lived in London before that, and we used to go to the National Gallery and all those places. So, but every time we went into the National Gallery, the first thing she wanted to see was in the main room. There was a big, huge painting of what's it called? Beheading of.
Oh, I know the one.
The little thing that turns the head to stone. What's she called?
It's Judas behead execution.
No, it's
Gorgon.
Like Artemis.
Oh God, I can't believe I forgot what it's called. It's the one that turns the head to stone when you look at it.
Oh, Medusa.
Medusa, that's it. Massive. The head, holding the head on that stone.
Kids love to be scared. They love it.
Yeah. It's like, I was like,
what's the favourite part of the Tower of London? With the Chamber of Horrors.
Or if you go back into nursery rhymes, having been a nursery teacher, I used to constantly, we used to change lines because it was politically not acceptable. And they used to say, no, you can't sing it like that, Julia, you've got to change it. And, you know, you can't have the fox having its head bitten off, or whatever it would be something we'd have to change. And I would say, but that's why they like it.
Yeah.
They like to scream.
You think about Grimm's fairy tales, and I remember that one of a woman who was a witch, and she had a daughter, and she also had a stepson. And she hated the stepson, and she had a big chest, and she asked him to get something out of the chest, and when he stuck his head in, she let the top fall down, and that beheaded him. And I think kids just take that in their stride.
That's true. Maybe that's another theme to cover at one point, actually, isn't it? Nightmares and horror and dystopia. We haven't done that yet. It's all been actually quite nice and very pretty, apart from the obstacles.
Fear is a
I'm too scared to go to that one. I won't. Such a whim.
Right, okay. So thank you all so much. I look forward to hearing from the rest of you next week. So there's dinner and a glass of red wine waiting. I hope there's something nice waiting for you all too. And yes, thank you so much for all the brilliant insights, and see you next week.
Cheers all.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye.